But either way, I think there's a deeper spiritual slavery that we've all been connected to and that we find ourselves in this life. But the good news is there's freedom. And so what we talked about is we looked at God and what God said to Moses, his promise to Moses about what he was going to do through Moses for the people of Israel. It says, therefore say to the people of Israel, I am the Lord. I will free you from your oppression and will rescue you from your slavery in Egypt. I will redeem you with a powerful arm and great acts of judgment. I will claim you as my own people, and I will be your God. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God who has freed you from your oppression in Egypt. And then he says this, and this last part's what we're going to talk about in today's idea worth discussing. He says, I will bring you into the land I swore to give Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It was this place of promise. It was this place that we're going to talk about today that is deeply special to the children of Israel at the time. It represented the opposite of the slavery that they were finding themselves in. And it represents so much more, as we're going to see as the story of God unfolds in this. And this is God's process and promise of liberation. I want to we're going to review quickly the first three steps of this process, and then we're going to get into the fourth today. And we looked at week one. We said Passover, this meal, this celebration, this remembrance, this moment in the children of Israel's life that was so important for freeing them. But Passover basically said this: there's a way out. God was letting his people know, I'm going to free. I've heard you. I've heard your cry. I'm the kind of God who hears the cries of his people and finds and provides a way out. And Passover points us to the work and the person of Jesus. And we look at and we see what God did through Moses for the people of Israel, that God is still doing for people through Jesus. And Jesus is that way out of this spiritual slavery that we find ourselves in. And in the next week, we said step one was liberation of being taken out. Where are you locked in slavery? We have to identify that. We have to look at that freedom. Where have we been locked in slavery? And we have to acknowledge that God wants to take us out of that. And we said freedom begins by answering the call of the liberator to be liberated. Liberation was about getting the people out of Egypt and getting Egypt out of the people. And if you connect Egypt to that thing that is trapping and enslaving us, maybe enslaving you in your own life right now, we look at it and we go, yeah, I'm free of this, but then there's this process to stay free of it, right? To get it out of your system, to change, to transform. There is always a process. And in step two, we see that God delivers his people, and we ask, where are you in a desert or wilderness unto death? Or what about you needs to die? Because sometimes something needs to die so that something else can live. And we said that imagination fuels emancipation. It's our ability to imagine life as other than it currently is that will help us get to that place of true freedom. And it is part of that process. And then we said last week, step three of liberation is redeemed. This was God not just taking the people out, but bringing them in to this divine union. And this was, you're my own. I claim you. We are in this together. And we saw their covenant and their agreement. And we said, where are you hearing God's new promise in your life? Is there a new or renewed promise that you need to hear in your life? And we said that God's promises always include God's presence. And I really felt like last week was an important discussion to talk about presence. And you can find all those things on our YouTube page. And so today we're going to jump into the last part of this process, this fourth question and fourth step, and that is taken to. God told Moses, I'm going to bring you guys to a place. I'm not going to leave you where you are. I'm not going to take you out and leave you in this in-between, but I'm going to take you to this place? And what action of God are you committing your life to? Because what we're going to see is that this process, that this taking out, this bringing in, and then this going to, this taking to this other place requires some action on our part. It requires this participation in the transformation that's going on. Because God accepts us where we are with the goal of taking us to a place where we are who we are meant to be. To this metaphorical promised land, to this place of, as what we're going to look at today, the way that one of the writers in the New Testament, he was writing a letter to Jewish Christians. He was connecting this story to the story of Jesus and to what God is doing in the world. And we're going to see that he uses this word. This writer used the word rest. Rest. It's this idea of this place of peace. This place where you are not working for a relationship with God. You are working from a relationship with God. You're not working for freedom. You're not working for liberation. You have already been freed from that. And we are working from this different place. And that's what I want to talk about today, is this place in our lives that we are, I believe that all of us are being pulled towards and carried towards, especially if we follow Jesus. If you're actively following Jesus, that is the place that Jesus is leading you. And so today I want to talk about what it means to experience God's rest and this participation, this active participation in this life of peace, in this place that God is taking us spiritually, that will bleed over into all aspects of our life. So let's look at Hebrews. Again, this is a letter written to Jewish Christians in the first century, and we're going to see him connect this story of God's promises with the people of Israel to everyone. It says, God's promise of entering his rest still stands. So we ought to tremble with fear that some of you might fail to experience it. You might miss this place of rest. I apologize. That you might miss this place of rest. It says, for this is good news that God has prepared his rest, has been announced to us just as it was to them. But it did them no good because they didn't share the faith of those who listened to God. For only we who believe can enter his rest. As for others, God said, in my anger, I took an oath. They will never enter my place of rest, even though this rest has been ready since he made the world. So this place of rest wasn't just this promised land, wasn't just this physical place, but this is a greater place of rest that has existed since the beginning of time. He says, because in the scriptures where it mentions the seventh day, on the seventh day, God rested from all his work. But in the other passage, God said, they will never enter my place of rest. So it's this idea that this place of rest, this place of peace, this place of you're not working for anything, you're working from something, has always been there. It was part of God's creation, just like the world has been there, just like you are here, and humanity has been here. And just like everything else, there's been this underlying current, this place of rest. It's always existed. And his invitation to the people of Israel was to bring them not just this physical location, but this physical location that represented this spiritual rest. And it says that good news is still here, but it's this. Experiencing God's rest starts with this belief. He said these people never experienced it because they didn't believe. They didn't trust God. They lacked the faith to connect this place of peace to the God that they followed. And now, belief is a funny thing, and hopefully maybe in our discussion later you can get into some of your thoughts and maybe some of the nuances of belief. But belief, so far as I can understand it, isn't something that you necessarily choose. It tends to be something that you realize about yourself, right? I realize that I believe this to be true. And there's even things that people say they believe, and then their actions, the way they live their life, is separate from that belief. But he's saying that this first aspect of entering this place of rest, it begins with belief. Again, not belief that you are working for. You're not working for something. It is the belief that it has already been done by God through Jesus for you. It's belief. It's one New Testament writer says, by grace and through faith. And grace says the unacceptable has been accepted. Faith says the unacceptable accepts that they are accepted. And that's what this belief, this faith is. And my hope and prayer is that people will understand, and they will believe, and they will trust that God has something for them, and it is a place of rest and a place of peace. Let's continue. It says, so God's rest is there for people to enter. I love that sentence, by the way. It's there. It's possible. There's a way out. It's there. This place is there. But those who first heard this good news failed to enter because they disobeyed God. Now, he's referring, I think, to two things here. First off, he's referring to the actual story, is that we see that first generation of oppressed, enslaved people that come out, they end up wandering the wilderness for 40 years. And basically what 40 years represents in a lot of the Jewish scriptures is a generation. So a generation, because they did not believe, and we're going to see because they disobeyed God, that their lack of obedience prevented their forward momentum into this place. And it took a whole generation before people would begin to experience this place that God had for them. And that just, I think, goes to show just the deep-rooted damage and hold that things in our life and our mentality have on us. And I think if you connect it again to those things that we mentioned that are deep-seated in us that tend to trap us, things that trap us, they don't let go so easily. And it takes time, it takes a process, and it takes belief, but then also obedience. He says, so God set another time for entering his rest. And that time is today. God announced this through David much later, and the words are already quoted. Today, when you hear his voice, don't harden your hearts. And we talked about that in our fruit series. What does it take to have a soft heart, a soft response to what God is doing? It says, now it's Joshua who followed up Moses in leading the people. If Joshua had succeeded in giving them rest, God would not have spoken about another rest still to come. It was this idea as they never fully achieved what God was really talking about. But today, he's saying that place is still there. And you can enter, you can experience it through belief and then obedience. Again, not obeying so that we get God's good grace. No, we obey because we have received God's good grace. It is a total switch in mindset. Let's continue. He says, so there is a special rest, this different kind of rest, waiting for the people of God. For all who have entered into God's rest have rested from their labors, just as God did after creating the world. So let us do our best to enter that rest. Let us do our best to enter that rest. Again, we are moving forward. We are working. We are participating with what God is doing in our lives, not because we want something, but because that something is already there and God is leading us to that. He says, but if we disobey God as the people of Israel did, we will fall. And we see this next aspect of experiencing. It's not just obedience, but it's devotion. See, let's try our best. Let's work to get here. Again, working from this place of rest and peace and acceptance and love, not for it. And since we already have it, since we're already free, since we already have been accepted, let's accept this journey in our life that God is taking us to this place of rest. So there's belief, obedience, there's devotion. And one of the unique things, if you kind of look at those three things together, it was really this devotion and these laws and this tabernacle, which became a temple in this process. God was really trying to show them this thing is that what we know from anthropology and history is that acts of religious devotion tend to keep a deity alive in the culture of a people. And it brings those people together around a center. And so when God was instituting these things that he had for them as a people, it was all in an effort to connect himself to them and to show them this bigger picture of rest. And so again, that devotion keeps spirit alive in us. It keeps hope alive in us. It keeps us moving forward when we devote ourselves, again, not for something, but from a place. And that devotion is the hard part. Maybe right now you see a lot of what's going on in the world and in your own personal life as you're suffering and you're trying to hold on, right? Like maybe mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, socially, you're at this point of death. I'm telling you that if you can hold on and devote yourself to what God is doing in your life and do not get discouraged as you move forward, this is what we're going to see. I love how Alexander Shia talks about it in his book, Heart and Mind, and how he talks about moving from this place of devotion to this place of rest. He says, what we feared, damaged beyond repair, dead, comes back to life. We look back with a sense of meaning, knowing that the course of events could not have been otherwise and was worth the pain. We begin to relax into our blessings and the self-value they imply. We dare to believe that we hold a blossom within. This idea that we dare to believe that there is a place of peace and rest, and God has granted to me, and I am in participation to experience that through belief and obedience and devotion. But I'm going to tell you, there's one more thing at the root of all of it, and it is this. It is yielding. It is this idea of surrender. All of this begins with a daily yielding, surrendering. Yielding, we oftentimes, that is for most of us a driving term, right? And to yield means I stop and I let someone else go. And that's what we're saying, is that all of this begins by stopping going our own direction, by stop thinking the way that we naturally think, and yielding our will and our direction and our transformation and our participation to another, to Jesus, to what God is doing through Jesus. And this daily yielding of our will is so we can be engaged with the will of God. This thing that is bigger than us gives us purpose. Because if peace is the destination, faith is the journey. And it is a journey. When you read through the story and you keep going, you see it is a journey. It was not an easy process, but it is possible. This promised land was possible for them, this place of rest, this place of peace. And how many of us, you're thinking, that's the thing I need right now? The anxiety, the depression, the hurt, the fear right now is overwhelming. And what I need is peace. And I'm telling you that place is there. But it takes faith. It's in faith that we experience God and the life that God intends for us. Because it is in faith that we surrender the path to peace to Jesus, to someone other than ourselves. He rescued us, he brings us into himself, and he leads us, and we surrender to that. Jesus, and this is kind of how I want to close this entire series, is this right here, this quote from Jesus that I think encapsulates all of what we've been talking about. It says, then Jesus said, come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens. And I can't help but think that's probably most, if not all of us. He said, come to me, all of you who are weak and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke, my work, my labor. The yoke was this thing that you would put on the back of your oxen that were pulling and plowing. And he's saying, put mine on you. Put this yoke on you that's going to help you do the work. But he said, let me teach you, because I'm humble and gentle at heart, and you will find rest for your souls. Why? Because his yoke, he said, my yoke is easy to bear. The burden I give you is light. I give you this different type of burden to bear that is light, and you can do it, and I'm with you, and I'm carrying it with you. Jesus says, come to me. I want to give you rest. The whole point of this freedom, experiencing freedom, was to experience peace. The whole point of breaking the chains in our life is to move to a place where God has accepted us just as we are, but he doesn't want to keep us there. Why? Because God is in the work of transforming people in the world. And he wants to transform you into the person you're meant to be, that person that you know you can be, or that person that you hope you can be. And I would say, not everyone on here maybe follows Jesus. What I would say is that following Jesus has been that process for me, because I believe that when Jesus said, "Come to me and I will give you rest," that he meant that. That not only that he could provide that rest, but that's what he does. And my hope is that all of us would answer this, because we are not working for a place of acceptance and love. We're working from it, from a place that it is already done through Jesus.